Welcome to Lesson 8. In the previous lesson we learned how to solo over the chords C and F, which were chords 1 and 4. Now we're going to learn how to solo over a 1-4-5 progression. In this case it will be C, F and G. Now there will be different chord notes that we have to watch out for when chord 5 or G is being played. G is made up of the triad notes G, B and D. And you'll find out that in your pentatonic scale there are only two spots where you can find the chord notes G and D, since there is no B in the scale that we've learnt. Now a quick look at the pentatonic scale pattern will reveal that the notes G, C and E, which can all be played at the 5th fret on the 4th, 3rd and 2nd string, are ideal end notes for your phrases over the chord of C, which is chord 1. And when the chord switches over to F, which is chord 4, we now have A on the 4th string, 7th fret, and we also have the C on the 5th fret, 3rd string. Now when G comes along, which is chord 5, the main chord notes are here. On the 4th string, the 5th fret, that's a G, and on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, here. Now, I'm going to play along to the background chord progression, the 1-4-5. It goes chord 1, chord 4, chord 1, chord 4, then it goes back to chord 1 again, then it goes to chord 5, then to chord 4, then to chord 1. So you have lots of time to anticipate when that chord 5 is coming up. Now I'm going to walk you through this chord progression. It goes chord 1, chord 4, chord 1, chord 4, chord 1, then chord 5, which is the G, then chord 4, then chord 1. And what I'll do is I'll talk to you as I'm creating some of these phrases so you can get a feel for how the creative process works. Here we go. Chord 1. Anticipating chord 4. Back to 1. Now it's going to go to 4 again. It'll go back to 1, then to 5. Chord 1. Now here comes chord 5, and I have to watch out. And I emphasize the chord note. Now 4. Back to chord 1. Now once again, I highly recommend that you download that progression. C, F, C, F, C, G, F, and C. Now, when you're soloing along, when you're making up those little melodic phrases, doing your 2-note repetitions and doing your pedaling, it is quite difficult not to keep playing constantly. You should stop for a breather. That is, try some pedal notes or some 2-note repetitions, and then try and end on the right chord note and give yourself a break. Just let the phrases breathe like I did in that previous example. Now I'm going to show you again what happens when you don't quite end on the right chord note, particularly when that chord 5 comes up, because if you're very new to this you will find it's quite difficult to find the appropriate chord note. So I'm going to walk you through it again, showing you what it's like when you're a complete beginner and how you can make some corrections to improve your playing. Once again, let me walk you through this progression as I solo, showing you what happens if you don't quite end on the right chord notes. Chord 1. Whoops, it wanted to go. Now here's chord 4. Again, that's a passing note, and you can hear how the tension of the passing note makes it want to resolve. Here comes chord 1. That works nicely. Whoops. Now chord 5, see, that really doesn't work. It really wanted to climb up to that chord note there. And back to 1. As you could hear from that example, when the chord changed and I ended on a passing note, it really sounded like I'd made almost a mistake. Now, what you have to do is you have to make those instant edits as you're jamming along. That is, if you're coming to the end of a phrase and you end on a passing note, quickly change and jump to the nearest chord note. Now, if you do end on a passing note, the nearest chord note will either be the next note along in the scale or the next note back. In other words, it's on either side of the note that's a passing note. So either go up to the next note or back to the previous note, and it should sound right. As you could hear from that example, when the chord changed and I ended on a passing note, it really sounded like I'd made almost a mistake. Now, what you have to do is you have to make those instant edits as you're jamming along. That is, if you're coming to the end of a phrase and you end on a passing note, quickly change and jump to the nearest chord note. Now, if you do end on a passing note, the nearest chord note will either be the next note along in the scale or the next note back. In other words, it's on either side of the note that's a passing note. So either go up to the next note or back to the previous note, and it should sound right. Now, that previous track, although it was at a slow tempo, it stayed on chords 1 and 4 for quite a while before going to chord 5. And of course, unless you're really paying attention, you can be lulled into sleep while you're playing over chords 1 and 4. Most of the chord notes available to you over those two chords, C and F, are pretty well everywhere that you're playing. You can find them and land on them. On chord 5, you had to be very selective and find the appropriate chord notes. Now, we're going to practice jamming along to another 1-4-5 progression. Again, it's still C, F and G, and it's still at a same slow tempo, but the chords change a lot quicker. Let's listen to this for an example. Now, I'm going to demonstrate in a second, but these chords will shift fairly quickly. They go 1, 4, 1, 5. Here we go. Now, again, I suggest you download the MP3 of that previous example. When you're practicing along to it, you will notice that those chords do change rather quickly, and you have to pay particular attention to chord 5, which is G. Anticipate as much as you can that change and try and find the right chord note to match that particular chord 5. As you do this more and more each day, you will notice that your phrases will make a lot more musical sense. So good luck, and we'll see you in the next lesson.